Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Aisha Noor, or you can just call me Noor. So here I do makeup while telling you murder stories that have been keeping me up all night. So without any further ado, let's jump into today's video. And today we are going to talk about the Rolex Killer. And don't forget to subscribe, comment, share, and give me a like. So yeah, let's jump in. So we are going. I did my foundation and eyebrows off camera, so I'm just going to start doing my eyes. So we're going to talk about the Rolex killer. His name was Albert Walker, and he was born in Canada. He's a Canadian citizen. Uh, in his childhood, there's not much about his childhood, just that he is a high school dropout. And then after he dropped out of high school, he started doing a lot of odd jobs. And from there, he became lucky and got a job as a bank teller. And he started helping people doing the income tax returns. And from there, everything was so good that he quit his job, and 2 years later he opened his own company called Walker Corporation, sorry, Walker Corporation. And it was so good, he had about 40 employees and 6 branches. That's how good this guy was doing. Everything was looking up for him until he he made a stock and it collapsed, and that's when everything went downhill for him. It resulted to him, defrauding 70 people of 3.2 million dollars. So as a result of that, he was on the run. He went to Europe and he changed his ID, and from he was now known as David Davids. So we're going to call him DD or Mr. David Davids. You will just know it's him. And when he ran away to Europe, he took his daughter with him, who assumed the role of his wife. Really, dude? Really, David? Not cool. So just keep all that information in mind. In July 28th in 1996, two fishermen went to fish, and there was no fish that day. So they decided, we are not going to go back home. Let's try another place. So they went to an area where it's people don't normally fish there. They call it the rafts. That's what they call it. So they went to the rafts, and within an hour of them like fishing and doing a work while they are fishing, so within an hour of them fishing, they bring up the nets and they caught a lot of fish, but with the fish came up a dead body. So immediately they called the police. They called the law enforcement, and at first the police thought that it was just an accident, because these are usual things that do happen in the area, because a lot of people go with their boats and fall off, and sorry, and fall off and wind up dead. So police officers did think that this was actually one of those incidents. They did not think there was foul play involved in this case. So the it was a man, and he had no ID. So the only thing he had was brown shoes, trousers, and a t-shirt, and he had a cat on his head, and but no ID. So one of the police officers was just like casually talking to the other police officer and saying, and like there was no ID on the dead man's body. It looks like it's a John Doe. There's no ID, but the only thing we found was a Rolex. And the other police officer was like, yo, you can literally, if it's a real Rolex, it has a serial number and it can be checked. So they took that watch to Rolex London, and the serial number came under the name of a Mr. Ronald Joseph Platt. But we are going to call him for the rest of the video Ron Platt. So that was his identity. So our man had an identity. He's known as Ron Platt. So what the police officers did, they took his information and they called his landlord to so that they can give the landlord gave the officer the number of the referee that you know Mr. Ron had put down as the person in contact as a referee, and it came to a Mr. D. Davidson. Yeah, it came as a Mr. D. Davidson. So how do these two know each other? Well, we are going to find out just now. The police called Mr. D. Davidson, and he was actually helpful. He even gave them a picture of Ron. In it, it was a picture of Ron and him, and he circled Ron, and he wrote like, this is Ron. He was actually very helpful. So there were a few formalities that were remaining. Mr. D. Davidson wasn't picking up the phone, so the police officer was wondering, why isn't he picking up the phone? So he sent one of his colleagues to Ron's address, and his house address was called London Little Farmhouse. Keep that in mind. So he sent one of the officers to his address, and fortunately or unfortunately enough, no, but it's fortunately, not unfortunately, because this works, you know, for the benefit of the police officers, and that's what we want. So fortunately enough, this officer went to the first house he saw. It was a rural area. It was a village, so there were only actually four houses on that street, to be specific. So he just went to the first house and he knocked, and a couple opened the door, and was like, "Oh, I'm looking for a Mr. David Davidson, who lives in the address known as, you know, London Little Farmhouse." And they're like, "No, no, no, no. This is London Farmhouse. London Little Farmhouse is next door, and he is not known as D. Davidson. His name is Ron Platt." And just then, that police officer's like, "What?" Red flags everywhere. Red flags everywhere, because this guy is posing as his his friend who is dead, Ron Platt. So they knew that, some foul play. They knew that. So they were trying to contact Ron. So them contacting Ron proved to be like, it wasn't working. They sent other police enforcement to go and question everybody who was, who knew Ron. And the first person they questioned were the fishermen who found Ron's blood body, and he said that he got a hook. It came up with the body, but he had given it to his friend. And when they asked the friend said, "Oh, I gave it to my mom to sell, so we have to ask her." So they asked the mom, and fortunately enough, she had not sold the hook. So it's going to play a very big part in cracking this case. So just keep that hook in mind. Another person the police officers did manage to find was a woman by the name of Elaine. Elaine was Ron's ex-girlfriend. They had been together for 10 years. And Ron and Elaine knew Mr. D. Davidson, and they met Mr. D. Davidson 5 years prior to Ron's death. But Elaine is the one who met Ron first. They met at her place of work. Sorry, they met at her place of work, and she describes Mr. D. Davidson as a very charming guy. He has a way with his words, and within minutes of them just interacting, he started talking about what he does for a living, and he offered her a job. And she remembered thinking, "I'm really not going to work for this man for that long, because me and my boyfriend Ron, we are planning to move to Canada." and that is going to actually work in the advantage to the advantage of Mr. D Davidson. You're going to know why in just a moment. So Elaine linked up Ron and her new friend, Mr. D. Davidson, and she said within minutes of Ron and D. Davidson meeting, Elaine linked up Ron and Mr. D. Davidson, and she says within minutes of them meeting, they became like two peas in a pod. They became literally best friends. Their conversations were just flowing. They you get it. So yeah, and he offered Elaine and Ron work at his company as director, and she was like, why are we working as directors in your company, and shouldn't you be the one who's the director? And she said he explained this as he had a wife who they were separated, but she had her own money. She was rich. That's his explanation. She was rich, but she was also after his money, and he wasn't going to allow that. And he wasn't going to allow that. So that was his explanation. And Ron, like we said earlier, Ron had a way with his words, so they had no reason to not believe him. I mean, this is their new best friend, so they had no reason to not believe Mr. D. Davidson. So they believed him, and they signed in. They took the jobs as the directors, but since Mr. D. Davidson knew that Ron and Elaine had plans to go to Canada, on that Christmas, he gifted them two tickets. But there's a catch. On the tickets could not be used after February. So Elaine Elaine was caught off guard. She's like, why are we going so soon? Like, can we stay? Like, must we go this soon? And Ron was really excited. He's like, this is our dream. And they ended up going to Canada. But before they went to Canada, Mr. Davidson suggested that they should make rubber stamps of their signature and leave them with him because of anything that's anything of the company that needs their signature, so that he can take care of it. And they're all the way in Canada, and he's in Yorkshire. They're like, okay, that makes sense. So they did make the rubber stamps of their signatures. Bad idea. Bad idea. Bad idea. So they went to Canada. Canada was not the expected. When they reached Canada, it was A, winter, and B, Ron couldn't get a job. Elaine couldn't get a job. They were struggling. Elaine did not like Canada a single bit. She wanted to go back home. And within 5 months of her being in Canada, she came back home. But the main reason why she came back home, it was her sister's wedding, and she was a bridesmaid. But she had decided, she had made up her mind, I'm not going back to Canada. So Ron had become like a family friend. So she invited she naturally invited Ron to the wedding, and as they got talking, she informed Ron that I'm not going to go. She informed Mr. D. Davidson. I keep on confusing the name. It's Mr. D. Davidson. She informed Mr. D. Davidson Ron is still in Canada. She came to Yorkshire. She went back to Europe by herself. So she informed Mr. D. Davidson that I won't be going back to Canada. I'm going to be staying here. And she says Mr. Davidson did not really like that. That news did not sit well with him. He tried to convince her to go back, and as much as he tried to persuade her, she did not budge. She was like, I said what I said. I'm not going back. I don't like it there. I like it here at home. So within days of her settling in, Mr. D. Davidson moved, and she found herself cut off. You know, she moved because all the finances he was handling that. So she found herself cut off, and all that she had was his phone number. He did not have his new address, his email address, nothing, just his phone number. And he went missing. And from then on, he assumed the identity of Ron Platt for the next 3 years. And this, this is why I keep on calling him Ron. This is why I keep on mistaking his name for Ron, because he assumed the identity of Ron. He went from being Albert Walker originally to Mr. D. Davidson. Now he is Ron Platt, his best friend. Mhm. So in 1995, Ron was like, I'm going back home. I am going back home. And do you know who doesn't like that news? Do you know who that news doesn't sit well with? You guessed it. The new Ron Platt, Mr. D. Davidson. Obviously, because he had assumed the identity of Ron. He was the new Ron. Everybody knew him as Ron. And he was parading around with his daughter as his wife. But his daughter had 2 kids. His much younger wife. So they were Mr. and Mrs. Platt. They went and bought houses as Mr. and Mrs. Platt. They paraded themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Platt. And what I can say about the daughter is like, she's a victim. Her father literally kidnapped her when she was 15 years old and went with her to wherever he went. So he had his grip on her. He had wrapped her around his finger. So, so the police reached out to Elaine and told her about, Ron's news. Ron is dead, and a Mr. D. Davidson. She's like, yeah, I know him. Oh, we talked to him. So Elaine knew that the police had talked to Ron, and not long after that, Mr. D. Davidson reached to Elaine, to just say hi, to just say hi. But then you know, Elaine told Mr. D. Davidson, "Did you hear about, Ron?" And she says that his voice just changed when she mentioned Ron. She was like, mm, okay. So he offered to take her to coffee, and because she did not want to look suspicious or like, anything, she accepted. She accepted. She did not want to seem suspicious of anything that she knows, any information. So she accepted to go for the coffee date. And after the coffee date, Elaine called the police immediately, and she's like, she just left, and he's going to, he's going at home. So they waited at the train station which he was going to get off, but Ron did not go home that night. He had other plans. So the police next day went to his house, and like I said, dude had other plans. I think he wanted to flee, because he got into a taxi and he was going, but the police were on to him. The police were on to him. So the taxi guy, chill dude, he said like he remembers this guy being very, chilled, nonchalant, charming. And as they were driving, he just saw a police car chase them so fast. And he remember, turning back to him and asking him, have I done anything wrong? Have I? Because he doesn't think he's done anything wrong. And he stopped. The police just went to the back seat and, told Mr. D. Davidson, now the new Ron Platt, that he is arrested for the suspect. He's being suspected for the murder of Ron Platt. And they took him to custody. Now they were looking for his alleged wife, who they did not know was his daughter. So they went to where she was staying, and she did not seem shocked at all. The only thing she was actually worried about were her kids, and she was packing, but the bag which she was packing her kids' clothes was quite heavy. So the police was like, let me check, and he found, just a minute. found gold plates. You know, those gold plates. Yeah, he found this. So he was like, we need to search this house from top to bottom. They searched the house. They they discovered a huge amount of money. They discovered paintings that were worth a lot of money, and they realized they may not only have an alleged murderer on their hands, they might also be playing with an alleged fraudster. So they took everything in, and the daughter went back to Canada. So the investigation went on for 2 years. So on the day of his hearing, this guy, this guy. So his daughter came back to, you know, as a witness, and she said that yes, she knew that Mr. Ron, like she knew that Ron was around, he was in the area, and that she knew that that day her father was going to his boat. But Lady Jane, it was missing. They did not know where Lady Jane was. Lady Jane was the name of his boat. But then they found it. And do you know what they found in the boat? They found Ron's blood on the cushions. So in his belt, they tested for zinc, the same zinc that is made of the hook. You remember the hook? Yeah. So they tested for that one. So that is like damning evidence against him. Then his daughter, one thing that she said she could not provide an one thing that she did is that she could not provide an alibi for the father. She knew very well, that that day the father went to the waters, went to his boat, and she knew that Mr. Ron Platt was in the area. But she did not say that. She couldn't like say that, oh, I witnessed the murder for sure, it happened. No. But she said, I cannot provide an alibi for him, and I knew that Mr. Ron was in the area. So in his Mr. Albert Walker took the stand. Now, we all know that he's a charming man. He has a way with his words. You know, the the one time his charm did not work, and the one time he needed it the most, this time. But when he took the stand, he was really, really nonchalant. He was like, I'm gonna do this. I'll do this. I'm charming. I have a way with words. No big deal. Guess what? It did not work. And he admitted that yes, I have done questionable things, but I have defrauded people, but what I did not do, I did not commit murder. I did not kill Ron Platt. I did not do that. That's what he said. But guess what? Guess what? The judge did not believe him at all. So it took only 2 hours. It only took hours, and like he was already convicted, life imprisonment. Only 2 hours. That's what you get for being a fraudster. This guy was on Interpol's most wanted list. He was a pretty dangerous man. Like, he defrauded a lot of people. A really dangerous man. He defrauded a lot of people for a lot of money, and he almost, just almost, got away with it. So he did not get away with murder. I mean, but he was pretty damn close to getting away with murder. He was pretty damn close. If only this guy picked up the phone the first time that officer was calling him, this guy would have gone scot free. And he had assumed identities of other people for years and years. Oh, I'm glad he's in prison. Anyway, so that is the story of the Rolex Killer, and yeah, do not murder people. Do not go around murdering people. So this is today's makeup look. I like it. I really like it. I like my lip the most. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, share, and leave a comment below. See you next time. Bye. Bye bye.